Hi there, and welcome to JLB Track tutorials. Track is used to record and maintain hazards and risks in the Hazards and Risks Register screen. Typically, these are WHS hazards that arise from site inspections, equipment inspections, and process assessments. However, they could equally apply to food safety or security issues, or any other types of potential hazards that are relevant to your business. Whenever WHS hazard or risk is identified, it should be added to the Hazards and Risks Register by selecting Hazards under the Safety and Environment taskbar. To add a new hazard to the register, select the New button on the top toolbar. A new hazard or risk screen will appear. However, today, I'll be showing an existing hazard to shorten the tutorial and save having to fill out all the fields. We can see that all the fields have been completed. The preliminary information should be entered first, being the date raised, which defaults to the current date but can be changed to when the hazard was initiated. The raised by field, which defaults to the user entering the hazard but can be changed by using the drop-down field. Which department the hazard is relevant to, and also the operational area where the hazard is located. And finally, a title and description of the hazard. Once the preliminary information has been entered, the new hazard may be saved by closing the page, saving when prompted. Once saved, another prompt appears requesting a reason for updating the hazard. The default reviewed and amendments made may be selected, or any other reason typed and saved. For example, initial assessment, control added, action taken, and so on. At any time, you can review when and why the hazard was altered by selecting Review on the top toolbar. The person or team who is responsible for assessing the hazard should then be advised. This may be completed by printing or emailing the hazard by selecting the option from the top toolbar. The company's risk assessment process can be linked to Track as a PDF document. It appears whenever Risk Help is selected within a hazard or risk. This will allow descriptions of the various likelihood, consequence, and risk criteria to be described. To assess the potential risk without a control implemented, refer to the company's risk assessment procedure and select the likelihood of the hazard occurring and also the consequence of the hazard using the drop-down fields. The level of risk is then automatically populated. You can then continue with the initial risk assessment by selecting whether the hazard is associated with a site, equipment, or process, then adding whether the hazard has any legislative or regulatory impact. Then finally, ticking with the box whether the company complies or not. Once this has been done, controls or preventative measures then need to be determined to reduce the risk. This is done by first adding the control, considering the company's established hierarchy of controls, which can be viewed by clicking on Hierarchy of Controls. Then conducting another risk assessment to determine the resultant risk of the hazard. This is done once again by using the drop-down fields for likelihood and consequence to automatically identify the risk. Then, if any further action is required to implement the control, add that action to any further action required. Then finally designating the person who is responsible for the action and also selecting a target date for the action to be completed by using the drop-down fields. When action has been completed, you should then describe what action was taken, and then select the date the action was completed, and also add the document number of any procedure that may have been developed or is relevant, such as an SOP or Safe Work Method statement. Risk assessments need to be periodically reviewed to ensure the risk assessment remains correct and the controls that have been implemented are working. Thus, at the bottom of the screen are review dates. So what needs to be entered is the last date review and also the next review date based on the risk. And then finally the name of the reviewer or who's responsible. The hazard is not closed unless the hazard no longer exists. So the hazard will remain open on the hazards register showing the relevant information, including the next review date. However, if the hazard is completely removed, the manager designated to close hazards and configuration is to review the control and what action has been taken, and if satisfied, select a date closed. This is done by using the drop-down field. Once a date is selected, or if today is selected, the manager's name will automatically appear in the close by field. This concludes the Hazards and Risks Register screen tutorial.